could do. Retired Detective August Schenner read about the case in the newspapers. He read about how the victims had been killed. He read about how they'd been found. It reminded him of a murder case nearly 20 years before. There were too many similarities. He thought he knew who the killer was. Schenner thought the killer was the famous journalist, Jack Unterweger. In 1974, a young girl had been found strangled with her bra and left in a wood. Jack Unterweger was convicted of her murder. Schenner believed he was killing again. Schenner told the task force of his suspicions, but the recent cases weren't identical to the 1974 murder.
The difference was the girl was not a prostitute, and it was a victim who he knew personally.
Und ihr sollt uns dann aufnehmen.
No one on the task force could believe Jack Unterweger was the serial killer.
Aber die Privatwirtschaft soll mir jetzt aufnehmen.
Unterweger was a writer and broadcaster. He had interviewed prostitutes and the police about the case. He had become famous while serving his prison sentence. He wrote plays and his autobiography became a bestseller. He was celebrated as a reformed prisoner. John Leake spent 3 years studying his life.
Well, I think the Austrians had never experienced a murderer who wrote a book. And it happened to coincide with a period in Austrian history when you had a lot of guys, both in government and writers and intellectuals and so forth, who were really revved up about this idea of criminal rehabilitation.
Lawyer Astrid Wagner is one of those who believes that Jack Unterweger had reformed.
Grundsätzlich glaube ich schon, dass jeder Mensch, der vernunftbegabt
I believe that everyone is endowed with reason and is basically capable of recognizing wrong and changing.
sich zu ändern. Und bevor Jack Unterweger entlassen wurde,
Before Jack Unterweger was released from prison, he underwent a series of psychiatric tests. This is a legal requirement. He passed them all, otherwise he wouldn't have been released.
ja, natürlich positiv ausgefallen, sonst wäre er ja nicht entlassen worden.
Unterweger won parole in June 1990.
Noch einmal kontrolliere ich meine Zellenordnung, dann mich.
He gave readings from his autobiography in cafes and theatres around the country.
Jung vergreist.
Kontraproduktiv.
When he appeared on television to talk about prison reform, he spoke from his own experience.
Sie wissen ja genau, warum im Gefängnis die Berufsausbildung nicht so klappt. Sie wissen ja das. Sie waren ja lang genug.
His charismatic appeal and his dangerous past attracted many women.
He had something about him that women really like. Because he was really funny. He had a good sense of humor. And women like that.
Frauen mögen das.
He had a string of girlfriends, including a schoolgirl, Bianca Marak.
3 Wochen vor meinem 18. Geburtstag habe ich...
I met him in a club in Vienna, 3 weeks before my 18th birthday. He kept toasting me across the bar, and we started talking. He was very eloquent. He was charming, he was nice, he could listen. All that was great.
Zuhören, also das war alles im Prinzip war okay.
Bianca Marak was aware of Unterweger's murder conviction.
Ich habe das wohl mitbekommen.
I knew about it, but I wasn't afraid because I was relying on the fact that if someone is released after committing such a crime, then they deserve to be free.
Es verdient frei zu sein.
Unterweger seemed to be an unlikely suspect, even with a previous conviction.
He wasn't like a man who killed prostitutes. He had a very good life. He was the darling of society in Vienna. He was a successful writer. He played theater, and he had a lot of young girlfriends. So why should he kill prostitutes? We didn't find a reason why he could be our offender.
But they had no other suspects. Unterweger was put under surveillance. He was followed until he went on holiday. The police had nothing to link him with the murders. Three months after her disappearance, the third missing Vienna prostitute was found in woodland. Sylvia Zagler had been strangled. Her stockings had been tied into a slipknot. Now, with 5 murders similar to the 1974 case, Vienna detective Max Edelbacher was suspicious. When Unterweger returned to Vienna, it was Edelbacher's turn to question him.
I confronted him with the fact that this case seems to really be very similar what has happened and why he was convicted. I confronted him and he said, I don't like to speak about this murder case. I can't remember anything and therefore I don't tell you.
Mehrmals in den letzten Monaten, bestimmt 15 Mal.
Unterweger didn't want to talk about his past. Edelbacher had no evidence to connect Unterweger to the murders. He had to let him go. But the police kept an eye on him. Seven months after her disappearance from Graz, the remains of Elfriede Schrempf were found in a wood. A ligature made from her clothing was tied around her neck. The police wanted to know where Jack Unterweger had been when she went missing, but their serial killer suspect. In 1992 in Los Angeles, the case of the triple prostitute murders remained unsolved. In Austria, the body count was 6. All had been strangled. Then the remains were found of a 7th Austrian prostitute, Regina Prem. Her husband was given the news.
That was terrible, because then I had to tell my son. He was 9 years old. He was crying for his mother, and that wasn't easy at all. You don't believe it can happen to you. You say it can't be. It's not possible. She will come back. But she didn't. It's over.
Her stockings had been tied around her neck in an intricate slipknot. But there was nothing else for the police to go on. The suspect was Jack Unterweger, a media figure and ex-prisoner. The murder he had committed in 1974 bore all the hallmarks of the 7 killings. The press had found out that Unterweger had been interviewed by the police, and then he disappeared. It caused a sensation.
The press will do anything to sell papers, and in the case of Jack Unterweger, you have to say they were extremely prejudiced. The newspapers had already decided that he was the murderer. I thought it was wrong that Unterweger was being portrayed as a murderer from the outset, without any chance of defending himself.
The controversy was fueled by the fact that the police had no evidence against Unterweger, but they were determined to find some. When they searched Unterweger's apartment, they found bills and receipts pinpointing his whereabouts at the time of the murders.
There was evidence that Unterweger had been where the crimes were committed at the time of the murders.
Jack Unterweger had no alibi. He had been in Vorarlberg, Graz and Vienna when each of the prostitutes had gone missing. But the lack of alibi was circumstantial evidence. It didn't prove he was the killer. There was nothing to connect him. to a victim. Only one piece of forensic evidence had been found, the red fibers on Heidi Hammerer, the first prostitute strangled in Vorarlberg. Did Unterweger own anything that matched those fibers? There was just one possibility. Unterweger's red scarf.
This was a crucial discovery. We were sure that the red scarf would be an important part of the jigsaw.
Forensic scientist Walter Bruchweiler's job was to compare the scarf with the fibers found at the crime scene. Under different light wavelengths, Bruchweiler determined that the color of the scarf fibers and the crime scene fibers matched. Then he looked at the physical form of the individual fibers.
We found that Jack Unterweger's scarf was made from the same material as the fibers found on Heidi Hammerer.
But the fact that Unterweger's scarf had touched Hammerer's clothing didn't prove he was her killer.
We cannot say what led to this contact. You cannot say that Jack Unterweger killed Heidi Hammerer just on the basis of transfer of fibers.
But there was something else in Unterweger's apartment which stunned police officers 10,000 kilometers apart. Jack Unterweger had been to Los Angeles and had made a surprising visit.
We found documents in Unterweger's apartment showing that he had visited Los Angeles and that he had been in contact with the police there.
They found business cards from Los Angeles police officers and a visitor card for police headquarters. The Austrians thought the LAPD would be shocked that their visitor was a suspected serial killer. But the Americans had news for them.
We phoned to LAPD and there we found out that in Los Angeles the same homicides were committed. We knew from this moment on we had an international serial killer.
The Los Angeles police now had a suspect for their serial murders.
This was fantastic. It was we couldn't believe it. Everybody was excited. My partner and I were quite excited. That, yeah, this looked like we did have a possible suspect, and where in the last 8 months we'd had nothing.
In June 1991, Unterweger had gone to Los Angeles after the Austrian police had put him under surveillance. They thought he'd gone on holiday, but he went to LA to work.
When Jack arrived in Los Angeles, he came to Los Angeles Police Department headquarters and requested to do a ride-along with one of our sergeants in the area of 6th and Main where he was staying. That his purpose for wanting to do this was because he was doing a story on the contrast or of the laws on prostitution between the United States and Europe.
The police showed Unterweger where he would find prostitutes. The article was published in December 1991. He wrote that life in the city was a struggle for survival. If Unterweger was the killer, it made the case extremely unusual.
Serial killers are typically regional or typically sort of static in a given area, a given city or a given part of a country, and they don't move generally outside that area. So transient serial killers are rare and unusual, and certainly international killers even more so.
But while the Americans had a suspect, like the Austrians, they didn't know where Unterweger was.
Suddenly, the ORF studio in Vienna starts receiving phone calls from him. Yeah, this is Jack Unterweger calling. I've had